Well, you certainly had a major influence, you know, being in the local area, and of course I was a biplane guy from the word go.
Well, that helped a lot in my viewpoint. I love my biplane still.
Well, you know, Curtis, since eventually this is my dream restoration facility, and this is the entrance, I thought it was only appropriate that my first airplane I built when I was 17 years old hangs in the lobby.
You're absolutely right, it should, Kermit.
I started building it when I was 17 years old in high school, and I flew it about 4 years later, and I remember the certification of the Pit Special was going on.
Right. Yeah, we were having a ball in those days and didn't realize it. I very well remember that airplane. I remember you flying it into my little strip.
Unbelievable. That little short strip, too,
that little
might
short,
add.
narrow, too, with trees on both sides.
Trees on both sides. Oh, those are the good old days.
No, that strip was only 75 feet wide.
Unbelievable. Well, I remember I went in there in high school in a Cessna.
Yeah, I know.
That was...
Well, there's been King Airs in there.
Really? Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah, Queen Airs, and Aero Commander.
How long was the strip again?
It's 1,850 feet
with
clear.
Obstacles on both sides.
Yeah, well, obstacles on both sides and both ends.
And you have to you have to really subtract a little bit off one end because you have to sidestep to go around the hangar.
Well, the FAA says, well, they got about 1,200 feet because you have to go over hangars before the strip begins.
Yeah, okay. Well, it was pretty short, even for a low-time pilot, for sure, in a Cessna. But I enjoyed going down there, and I probably must have asked all sorts of questions and stuff. You don't remember anything specific, just...
No, I remember you were talking to me and Gene about sweeping the wings on the special, in the lower wing.
Yeah?
Yeah, and I wondered there for a bit if you could handle it, but you kept talking to Gene, you got it handled.
Well, Gene, you know, a lot of it was eyeball engineering on my part, but if I felt like something was, you know, beyond my level, boy, I flew right down to y'all's place and asked, you know, is this right? This is what I think it should do, and I know y'all helped me out a couple of times, and I appreciate that.
You know that Gene's a fantastic structures engineer.
Yeah?
Yeah, he's worked for a lot of the big companies.
Originally, I had a landing gear that was designed by the original designer, and they'd been having problems with it, and there were some modifications to beef it up. Eventually, it ended up bending like all the other ones did, and I came up with this design myself here, and it looked a little bit more like a World War I airplane. So
it looked like it'd work okay.
Yeah, it was great. These are motorcycle tires and stuff, and of course it had a 150 horsepower engine, and you know, I thought this was going to be my Aerobatic airplane, but of course it was nothing like a Pit Special. Eventually I had to go on and get a Pit Special.
Eventually we won most all of you over.
Yeah, we did. Well, I think I carried the biplane banner in the Aerobatic world longer than anybody did.
You definitely did.
Competition.
You definitely did. You did a good job of it too.
Well, I tell you, you really inspired me early on. Went on later to do the Aerobatic airplanes, but I was a biplane man from the start.
I appreciated that too. I really love my biplanes.
Well, with your little airplane, you brought so much joy to so many people, and I was just one of the flock, so I appreciate all you did.
I was one of the flock too. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Now, Curtis, here's the Weeks special. We went ahead and hung it up because there's still a little bit of damage from Hurricane Andrew.
It brings back a lot of memories, Kermit. I know it does for you. This little airplane has quite a history, actually. You really made a name for yourself with it. Made us proud of you and the airplane.
Well, thank you.
You really carried the biplane banner ahead.
Well, you certainly gave me the inspiration with the pit special, and you know I had a few ideas that I wanted to try sweeping the lower wings, some symmetrical, different, bigger ailerons, and I think I got the performance increase that I was shooting for.
I believe you did. I believe you did. You did a real good job of it.
I wanted to honor you by calling it a super pit special, but I kind of heard through the grapevine that it was probably better I didn't do that.
Well, I did make a remark that I hoped you would call it a pit special because it was so highly modified and we didn't know what might happen.
Exactly. Well,
We're afraid of those lawyers.
That's right. Well, and because of that, that's the reason I called it a week special. But
We were happy with that.
well, that's good. But I think you would have been proud ultimately, you know, that we certainly
yeah.
gave credit to the Pitts lineage.
Definitely. You did a heck of a good job of display with that thing.
Well, you know, one thing that was interesting early on in my experience with the airplane, and I know there was a problem initially with the Pitts S2 with a stabilizer flutter. There was a problem where one of them actually broke off and went back. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, actually, when we did the vibration survey on the thing, at one frequency, we could get a little vibration of the leading edge of the stabilizer. But we didn't figure that it was serious at the time. But over time, it kept vibrating so long till we had fatigue there, and that leading edge tube failed. So after that, we put this brace that you see leading from the bottom fuselage up to the leading edge. That cured the problem.
Well, you know, early on, when I was doing some of what I thought at the time was a correct procedure for aileron, check and aileron flutter, I had read in aerodynamic books to dive down to a certain speed, hit the stick one way and go back and hit the stick the other way and, you know, increase in 5 mile an hour increments. And realizing now that's not a great way of doing that because ultimately if you get flutter, you're bailing out.
That's right.
But while I was doing that, I actually was at a very high altitude, and the red line on the pits, single place pits, was
203.
203. I was at 10,000 feet and ultimately got up to about 240 miles an hour indicated, and lo and behold, I never had an aileron flutter problem, but that stabilizer fluttered on me, and it was fluttering not quite as fast as my heart was after that. I came back down, and I didn't fly the airplane again until I put that brace on.
That was a smart move. I've only experienced flutter with one little airplane. It was a midget Mustang many years ago.
Really?
And it wasn't aileron flutter. We thought it was. It was the wing bouncing up and down. And I eventually got aggravated. I got a piece of lead, removed the tip section of the wing, bolted this onto the rib forward as far as I could, put the cap back on. We never had flutter again.
Really? Unbelievable.
At 205, you could agitate it, and it would flutter every time.
Well, I like to do flutter testing on the ground with Leon these days.
That's the safest way to do it.
My flight test days are over, I think. You know, I think a lot of that was out of ignorance on
Absolutely.
on all of our
all
parts.
of us have been through that.
Anyway,
You know, I came along before they had this tested method. The method we used actually on the S2 was crude compared to what he's doing here.
really?
Yeah, they had a little rotating eccentric weight. They'd changed that weight to get more amplitude. And the frequency was picked up off the tachometer, how fast the weight was turning.
You're kidding?
Right.
I'll be darned.
You take a weight with a little more, same size weight, but a little more off center, you get more amplitude.
Huh.
So we changed those weights to change the amplitude.
But the science of actually the vibrations and where they were and the node lines, and that hasn't really changed, has it?
Not very much. We did have the pickups on the wing.
Right.
I think we had 6 pickups on the wing. And we put one on that stabilizer we were talking about, but we and the FAA didn't figure it was a problem.
I didn't feel it was a problem. It was a problem that had happened with the S2.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was an issue until it fluttered on me at a speed far faster than I should have been flying.
Well, that's true.
Of
we
course,
all felt the same way.
Well, I went back. I didn't fly the airplane again until we put that brace on, and then after that, I never had a problem.
That's right. Well, there she is with a lot of memories, a lot of accomplishments too.
And this is the youngest man on the United States team getting ready to go in the air, 26-year-old Kermit Weeks from Miami, Florida. And now we watch Kermit in the air going through his maneuvers. And the question for the man in that cockpit, what goes through his mind?
Just kind of stay relaxed and don't think about anybody's watching it, anybody's judging it. You're just in the airplane. It's you, the airplane, and the box, and that's all there is to the world.
I'm Curtis Pitts, C-U-R-T-I-S, P-I-T-T-S. Well, when I was a kid, I got interested when I was in high school. This little town I lived in Georgia, Americus, Georgia, had a World War I training base that was vacant, and there's quite a bit of flying around it. And I was fortunate in being able to spend quite a bit of time there, looking at the airplanes and wondering about them and wishing. Well, in later years, after I learned to fly, I became interested in aerobatics. And I'm talking to some friends, and they suggested that I buy a Waco, that they knew where there's a Waco F I should have for aerobatics. So I bought it, brought it home, and I never was able to do anything with it. It's so unwieldy. So I kind of thought that maybe we could build a better airplane than that for sure. We had these small light opposed engines at the time, and I figured I could get the power to weight ratio better than the Waco was, so started to work on it. At the time, I was working for the Navy during the war years in the aeronaut shop and in the inspection department. And as I worked on this thing and I had problems, I became friends with the engineer there, and I'd go to him and get help with the problems. So that's how the first Pitts got developed. Well, the first little airplane that I built was completed in 1945, and I flew it for about 4 months and a total of 40 hours. Well, the first model, everybody was kind of in awe of. It was a little bitty airplane. They just didn't believe it could do the things that it was doing. And I didn't keep it very long. As usual in those days, I ran out of money and I had to sell it. I think $2,600. Wow. Well, the next model is actually the one that Betty had. I built it in Gainesville, and we flew it for about a year and sold it to World Air Shows. And some kind of disagreement came up between them and the pilot, and he sold it to Betty Skelton. At the time she bought that airplane, she was 22 years old, and she was a real performer. Everybody loved Betty in the air show business. Well, it has been in restoration in Washington, D.C. for about 5 years. And on October the 4th, they're going to put it on display in the Smithsonian. And hopefully Betty and I both can be there. We bought fuel injection engines when they came on the market. Yeah, as opposed to the carburetor engine. Let me tell you a funny little story about my first inverted system. On this Waco, I made a little fuel tank I put down in the landing gear leg, and I run a tube up, stuck it into the bottom of the carburetor, and you roll over on the back, the gas would come down through that tube and run into the carburetor. At first we had too much fuel, it was choking down. So we made a jet. We took the pliers and we flattened the end of the tube a little bit so it wouldn't so much come out. We finally got that thing to where it would run pretty good, inverted at full throttle. Yeah, I first met him when he came walking into my place in the Homestead to look at airplanes. And it wasn't long after that till he came in with the first airplane he had built, the Jaeger. So he was really enthusiastic about flying. I've always kind of appreciated people being interested in flying and airplanes because I was an airplane nut myself. I really don't know how other people perceive him, but knowing Kermit as long as I have and knowing what he's done for practically all his adult life, I really appreciate what he's done. Kermit goes full steam ahead all the time, that's for sure. He's making a big contribution to aviation. I thought it was going to be a right good airplane. I think I might have offended Kermit a little bit. I made the remark that I hoped he didn't call it a Pitts because he had modified it so much. But it was quite an airplane, a real performer. He bought Pitts drawings from us, and from that he built his own airplane the way he thought it should be. But he kept coming into my shop and talking to my engineering me about things he wanted to do. He didn't go jump off the deep end like a lot of people do, things he didn't know about. If something was bothering him, he went and talked to somebody that knew about it. So that's why he was successful with these airplanes, really. He just didn't get stupid, is the best way to put it. Not a bit, not a bit. I thought that was appropriate. Probably. I don't recall anything specific, but I'm sure I did. You can learn something from every airplane you look at if you'll pay attention. Well, I'll tell you, that Weeks solution had an awful lot of performance for what it was built for. That airplane was capable of doing anything in world competition that any other airplane was. And Kermit did real well with it.
Art Show, you've seen Kermit Weeks in practice, so you know what to expect. It's spectacular. Look at this vertical roll that he starts.
Bill, he does 14 vertical rolls. This in comparison to 10 or 12, which is understood as being outstanding. But look at that aircraft go. He's able to do this because of his horsepower-weight ratio. And you know, this is probably the ultimate. You couldn't go any more than this. He's at the top of the box, just spinning like a cork right up there. And watch this now as he comes on down, and he'll flip back into the vertical down position. Outstanding performance.
It is fabulous, absolutely unbelievable. Well, seeing a place like this, it's actually unbelievable that it could happen in the short period of time that it has. I think it's a real boost to aviation. The young kids that come in here are probably just like Kermit and I, they get turned on. And from there, it expands, I guess, until they end up being pilots or owners or whatever. Actually, the people that get into the aviation business that have been to this place will never forget it. They'll remember it all their lives. And it's going to be an inspiration to a lot of people to do something in aviation. If I were starting now, I really don't know. It's a very difficult thing today. When I got started with nothing. And I think that would be impossible today.